All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin an exciting day ahead of us. Begin by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Shvat, Mrs. Bracha Strimber, in loving memory of her husband, Avi Strimber, Aharon ben Kálman Eliezer Halevi. Our Talmud Torah sponsor, Avi Tobias, an appreciation for the shir, an appreciation for the shir and for the daf. So our day of learning sponsors, Chaim and Malky Wecker, in commemoration of the shloshim of Rita, Bayuk, Zichron Levracha, Risha, Bas, Aharon, Hakohen, Zichron Levracha, and my parents also dedicating the day of learning in commemoration of the yahrzeit of my grandmother, Zichron Levracha, Freyda, Bas, Moshe Yosef. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas have an aliyah and the families in nechama. And also with that, let us begin. So, Shechianu, V'kiyemanu, V'higyanu, Lazman Hazeh, that we are zocha to begin. Daf Lamed Beis, Daf Leiv of Meseches Megillah, and we're going to see that Daf Lamed Beis is filled with much heart. Much beautiful Gemara, beautiful sugya. So also with that, let us begin. So we actually left off yesterday, I believe, at the 2 dots in the wide, right after Karbanos, in the wide lines, 2, 4, 6 lines down in the wide lines. Beta'anios, brachos, uklalos, ein mafsikin biklalos. So also remember again, the Mishnah introduced us to this concept. Good. Mishnah introduced us to the concept of ein mafsikin beklalos, that we don't go ahead and stop in the middle of klalos. So whenever we're reading a section of klalos, a section of curses, like the tochacha, we always go ahead and read it as one aliyah. So it says the Gemara, listen to this, minahani mili, how do you know ein mafsikin beklalos? So the Gemara says, Amar B'chia bar Gamda, Amar Basi, do Amar Kra, Musar Hashem b'ni al timas. Because the pasuk says literally again, the Musar of Hashem, my son, do not go ahead and be repulsed by it. And I will say, now what does it have to do with anything? Look at Rashi. So this is incredible. Rashi says, Al timas b'mafsik bohen mara atzmo shekasher lo likros. So also listen to this. If you go ahead and you stop in the middle of reading the klalos, what does it look like? It looks like it's too much for you. It's too much for you to read. You don't want to read it. The pasuk says, when Hakadosh Baruch Hu gives you musar, right? That's what klalos are. That's what curses are on the Torah. They're musar. So when Hakadosh Baruch Hu gives me musar, what's my avodah? What's my job? My job is to take the musar, to learn the musar, to read the musar. And if I stop in the middle of the musar, it looks like that I'm pushing back against the musar. Shlakish says, this is incredible. The fish in omrim bracha ala paranos. Rish Lakish says there's a different reason. You can't stop an aliyah in the middle of both, because what happens if you stop an aliyah in the middle? Then the second aliyah, well, both aliyahs, so let's imagine this for a moment. You start the tochacha, you make a bracha, or I should say you start the klalos, you make a bracha, then you end an aliyah, another bracha, make a second aliyah, a second bracha. You're making all of these brachas, quote unquote, on klalos. And we don't make brachas on klalos. We don't make brachas on curses. So the Gemara says, so what should I do? So the Gemara says, Tana kishu maschel bepasak shelifneim, kishu mesayim bepasak shelacharein. It's very simple. Start a pasuk earlier than the tochacha, start a pasuk earlier than the klalos, and what? And a pasuk later. That's it. So therefore I was saying, we'll make it one aliyah, therefore I'll make the bracha before the tochacha starts, I'll make the after bracha after the tochacha ends, and Shalom Yisrael, says the Gemara. So I just want to point out there's 2 principles here. One principle that was espoused was ein mafsikin beklalos, and the second one was ein mevarchin beklalos. We don't stop in the middle of curses in the middle of klalos, and we don't make a bracha. We're going to see these 2 interesting applications of this. So Amar Abai qualifies this, and he says as follows. This is only true with regarding the klalos in the Sefer Vayikra. Torah, but the klalos that are mentioned in Chumash Devarim, Posek, you are permitted to stop in the middle. What's the logic? My taima. Halalu b'loshon rabim amuros u'moshe mepia gvura aman. Because we both say the klalos in Sefer Vayikra are said in the plural, and Moshe Rabbeinu said them over in the name of Hashem. They were said from Hashem to Moshe, and Moshe relayed them to Klal Yisrael. V'halalu, but the Klalos in Sefer Dvarim, B'lashon Yachid Amuros. First of all, they're said in the singular. U'Moshe mipi atzma amran, and Moshe ultimately again said them over of his own volition. Rabbi said, like much of Sefer Dvarim, most of Sefer Dvarim is Moshe Rabbeinu reviewing details with Klal Yisrael, and it's Moshe Rabbeinu's own stream of consciousness. Therefore, again, interestingly enough, Abaye wants to suggest that when we speak about not making a bracha on klalos, or not stopping in the middle of klalos, that's dafka the klalos said from Hashem to Moshe in Chumash Vayikra that are phrased in the plural. But the klalos of Sefer Dvarim, which essentially are Moshe's own words. In other words, it's Moshe Rabbeinu reviewing this of his own volition. Those you could go ahead and stop in the middle. So the Gemara goes Wecker. Levi Barbuti havakakari v'kamagam kamed Rav Huna. Baruri. Listen to this. I will say. Levi Barbuti was reading the Tocha, was reading the Klalos. V'kamagam. Rashi says over Megam was kara osam b'merutza u'bekoshi. He was reading the Klalos very quickly. Bekoshi means with difficulty. Probably means mumbling. Right? He was reading it mumbling. In other words, he was looking to get through it very quickly. So listen to this. So Rav Huna said to him, Akinafshecha, don't worry about it. Rashi says over here, Kinafshecha, Imritzoncha lahafsik pasuk, hoil va'ata katz b'kriyasan. If you want to stop, right? So this is Rav Huna now speaking to Levi Barbuti. He's clearly saw that he was uncomfortable reading the psukim. So if you want to stop, if you want to pause, that's fine. Because lo shana ela klal shabataras kanim. Aval shava mishnah Torah posek. Because apparently, again, Levi Barbuti was reading of the klalos in Chumash Dvarim. And Rav Huna said to him, if you need to stop, stop. Because the only time you can't stop is for the klalos in Chumash Vayikra, not for the klalos in Chumash Dvarim. Both say absolutely incredible. So I'll tell you something interesting just about this idea. So now what comes out from this sugya, and this is how we paskin, right? We don't split up aliyos in the middle of the tocha. The truth is we never split up aliyos in any tocha. That's the truth, whether it's in Vayikra or in Dvarim. So again, we have two concepts over here, as I mentioned. In mafsikim b'klalos, we don't stop an aliyah, right? We don't pause in the middle of klalos, and in mevarchin ala klalos. So, I'll tell you something amazing. So, Moshe Feinstein Zechazad Livracha in Igros Moshe quotes this concept to highlight something fascinating. He says, "Why is it that by a levaya we don't make a bracha on kriya?" Right? There's an obligation. A person is obligated to mourn for the 7 close relatives, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter, a spouse. And there's an obligation of kriya to tear your clothing. So says Moshe, why don't we make a bracha on kriya? Or for that matter, again, he says, why don't we make a bracha on kvura? Right? Kvura, burying the dead, is a chesed shel emes, the highest level of chesed. So why don't we make a bracha on these mitzvos? And Moshe says incredible, because in mevarchan ala klalos. He espouses this idea. It's really incredible that we don't make a bracha on any mitzvah that is associated with death, that is associated with misfortune. And he bases such a fast. I never even thought of the shaila before. And he bases it on this Gemara. So that's from a halachic perspective how Moshe takes the concept of in mevarchen ala klolos and essentially applies it to in mevarchen on any mitzvah which is associated with death, with tragedy, with loss, with misfortune. I'll show you something. There's another idea over here. That's a halachic perspective. From a hashkafic perspective, there is a beautiful sfas emes. And the Ger Rebbe says as follows. I want to read to you this piece from the Ger Rebbe Parshas Re'eh. Listen to this idea. He says, Midas hishtavos. One of the most important midos is the midah of hishtavos. Now, I will say, what does it mean, hishtavos? So from a lashon of shaveh, the midah of equanimity. Equanimity. I'll say, what's the midah of equanimity? The ability to be an even-keeled person. Right? Hishtavos means I could maintain a level of equanimity, a level of just, I could operate at a certain baseline, a calmness, a certain level of emotional fortitude. I'm not easily excitable. Right? Equanimity. I try to, good. So listen to what he says. This is so beautiful. V'hainu lekabel, now what does it mean? V'hainu lekabel kala ma'oros b'shaveh. To be the kind of person who is able to go ahead and deal with every life situation with a sense of calm. Right? They both say there are people like this, Baruch Hashem, it's a difficult midah to have, but some of us just very easily excitable, fly off the handle very quickly, break down with stress very quickly, or get angry very quickly. The midah of hishtavus is the ability to go ahead and deal with all types of situations with a level head. With a level head. Look what he writes. Kim adam mishtana bepigo b'midas hadin in the kim. Because again, the sasam is that he goes on, it's a much longer piece, but he explains, because if at the end of the day, you don't have the midah of hishtavus, you don't have the midah of equanimity, it's impossible to be successful in life. Because life is filled with excitable moments. Right? And I don't mean excitable moments like the good kind of exciting. Right? The excitable moments with like difficulties. And if a person loses it every single time they encounter a stressful situation, a person just loses control every single time something difficult happens, then at the end of the day it's impossible to be successful. And look what he writes. He says, V'zesh Amar, listen to how beautiful this is. Says the Sasemes, this is the Pshat in the Gemara, Ein mafsikin b'klalos. Listen to this idea. Ein mafsikin b'klalos, says the Sasemes, says, Ein mafsikin. You cannot stop your avodas Hashem. You cannot stop your devekus. You cannot stop your life work b'klalos when difficult things happen. You see, sometimes difficult things happen, and what happens? We're sidelined. We're sidelined, right? Something, I get thrown a curveball. There's a valley in life. There's adversity. There's tragedy. There's difficulty. And we become paralyzed. And we become paralyzed, or we become angry. It's the same thing, because anger paralyzes also. Right? And I lose it. I just totally lose it. And then what happens when I lose it? I compound the difficulty. Because now, not only do I have a difficulty, but at the end of the day, I've effectively been rendered non-functional in life. Therefore, says the Sasemis, this is the pshat. Ein mafsikin b'klalos. Even when life throws you a klala, even when life throws you adversity and difficulty, ein mafsikin. You can't stop. You can't stop. You have to power through. You have to keep going. Whatever you have been doing, keep doing it. Whatever your avoda is, don't stop. Ein mafsikin b'klalos. So we'll say, sometimes you come across something. Sometimes you come across something and you realize, like, I've just stumbled upon a piece of life wisdom that will forever change the way that I live. And every day I come to the daf and I emerge with it with like a new life mantra. And the new life mantra now is Ein mafsikin b'klalos. That's it. That's the bumper sticker. Forget about my kid is on honor roll or whatever. Right? So Ein mafsikin b'klalos, because every single day is filled with klala. I know that sounds like a terrible thing, but when I say klala, I mean adversity. Every single day brings its adversity, and too many of us, when we encounter that adversity, we shut down. We panic. We get overwhelmed. We stop. We get angry. You can't do it, because then every single day I lose traction. Ein mafsikin b'klalos. No matter what klala life throws your way, don't stop. Keep doing what it is you know you need to do, and keep accomplishing. So in mevarchin ala klalos, Rav Moshe gives me a halachic idea. In mafsikin ala klalos, the Sasemes gives me a hashkafic idea, and really a hashkafic mantra. Beautiful. What says, go weiter. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. It's beautiful Gemara. Ezra tzikin lehem liyisrael shu korin klalo shebetoras kanim kod matzera. So we'll say Ezra, when he set up the system of Kriyas HaTorah, so he said that we should go ahead and read the klalos of Torah's kanim of Vayikra before Shavuos. Mishnah Torah called them Rosh Hashanah, and the klalos of Sefer Dvarim before Rosh Hashanah. What's the logic? My timer. Because the idea is we want the year to end and the curses to end with it. So we'll say it's an interesting Gemara. So therefore, we read the curses before year end, so that we should let the curses, any klalos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu may have to visit upon us, they should go ahead and be part of the previous year, and we should walk into the new year tabla rasa, with a blank slate, right? Clear, full of opportunity. So says the Gemara, okay, so I understand reading the klalos and Chumash Devarim, right, before Rosh Hashanah, because that's literally, Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the calendrical new year. So I understand. I want the new year, I literally want the calendrical new year to start with a fresh slate. With a fresh slate. I understand that. Ella, Shavataras Konim, Atu Atzaras Rosh Hashani. But what does it mean that I should finish the klalos of Sefer Vayikra before Shavuos? Shavuos is not a new year. So what does that mean? To which the Gemara says, in Atzeres Nami Rosh Hashanah. No, it's not true. Even Shavuos is a quasi Rosh Hashanah as well. How so? Disnan Uba Atzeres Aperos Ha'ilon. There was, we learned this in Maseches Tainis as well, that ultimately, again, on Shavuos, we are judged for the fruits of the tree. We're judged for the bounty of the fruit trees. So therefore, Atzeres, Shavuos also has an element of Rosh Hashanah, an element of New Year associated with it. Therefore, I will say the idea being that before Shavuos, we want to finish up the klalos in Sefer Vayikra. Before Rosh Hashanah, we want to finish up the klalos in the Chumash Dvar. I will say also such a powerful yesod that sometimes in life, in order to maximize new opportunities, you have to believe that they're going to be great. Right? I will say sometimes, especially if we've suffered many setbacks in life, we automatically assume that the future will be just a replica of the past. And if the past has had setbacks and tragedy and difficulties, so that's the future. That's the future. And the truth is, there's very little hope, and there's very little optimism, and there's very little drive to build a better future. So Chazal teach us, you know what, sometimes the best thing you could do is finish up the klalos before Shavuos. Finish up the klalos before Rosh Hashanah. Because the only way to embrace new opportunities is with hope and optimism. In other words, if you think that your future is just going to be the same thing of the past, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy and the future is going to be dark and gloomy. But if you believe that no matter what the past has been, the future could always be better, then you are setting yourself up for dramatic success. So Shavuos represents, again, the tree. This is by the beautiful time to Tu B'Shvat as well, which we'll leave for later. Right? But the idea of the tree, right? Adam is hasoda, right? So Shavuos is the new year for fruit, is the din, is the judgment for fruit trees. Ultimately, again, now I have to finish up the klalos. The new year could be good. Rosh Hashanah, new calendrical year, the new year should be good. Keep the klalos in the past. The past is the past, and the future can be magnificent and incredible, even if the past has been a little bit difficult. Let's go Weiter. So the Gemara is also another beautiful Gemara. So many beautiful Gemaras. So the Gemara says as follows. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Elazar Omer, Im Yomur L'cha Zekenim Sisar, O Yedal V'Yeladim B'nei. So let's listen to this. If older people tell you to demolish, and if older people tell you to demolish, and young people tell you to build, Sisar, demolish, V'al Tivna, and do not build, Mipnei Shestiras Zekenim Binyan, Ubinyan Ne'arim Stira. Because the demolition of older people is building, and the building of younger people is demolition. Which Rabbi says essentially is Chazal's way of saying, don't necessarily take life advice from youth. For one simple reason. Young people may have a lot of book smarts, but the one thing they don't have is life experience. And the truth is, in the realm of life advice, there is nothing more critical than life experience. We'll say that's why, again, remember, interestingly enough, a zaken, right? Chazal tell us, what does a zaken stand for? Zeh shekana chachma. Right? Someone who has acquired wisdom. I will say, but what about someone who hasn't learned Torah? Is he still called a zaken? So remember again, zaken is a generic term also used for someone who's old. So it's fascinating because from the eyes of Chazal, even if you've never cracked open a sefer, if you're old, by definition, you have wisdom. How do you have wisdom? Just from life experience. So the Gemara says, if you have two people whispering in your ear, a young person telling you, do this, do this, do this, and an old person telling you, don't do that. Chazal said, chances are, listen to the older person. Right? Even if the younger person is telling you to build, and the older person is telling you to demolish, take advice from people who have life experience. So we'll say, such an incredible, so we'll say, we all know people who are very smart. They're very smart. But being smart, I think we begin to realize this, like as we get older, and we really have to move on. I'll say, but again, what's interesting to notice, when you're young, right? So like the metric of success is smartness, right? Who's smart? Who's smarter? Because the truth is, if you're smart, that's how you can get through school. That's how you could do well, which are the basic metrics of success as you go. And then when you're younger, then as you get older, we begin to realize that like the most profound and successful people are actually not necessarily the smartest people. They're the wisest people. And being wise and being smart are not necessarily the two things. A person could be very smart, but not wise. And a person could be very wise, yet they might not be so smart. It's an incredible yisod, and that's the Chazal telling us over here. If you're getting advice from the youth or from the elderly, take the advice of the elderly. So so much to say on this. I will tell you, as someone who has the schus, but also the difficult responsibility of sometimes being with people in their last moments. When you hear people reflect on life, when you hear a zokain talk about like what's important, some of the most profound things I've heard in my life are from elderly people who realize life is coming to an end. They were not Torah scholars, not by any stretch of the imagination, but lived a whole life and were able to see MS. It's an incredible, incredible thing. So therefore, that's the Gemara says. The Gemara says, what's the siman for this? The siman l'davar Rechavam ben Shlomo. So I'll say Rechavam ben Shlomo. Remember, Rechavam was the son of Shlomo. Now Rechavam had two sets of advisors. He had his buddies, right? His buddies from yeshiva, who now became Baruch Hashem the advisors once Rechavam was king, and then he had his father's advisors. His father's advisors encouraged him to be soft and loving with the people. His buddies encouraged him to rule with an iron hand. Well, he listened to his buddies and not his father's advisors, and as a result, the kingdom of Yisrael seceded. Right? There was a fracture in the kingdom. People no longer wanted Rechavam. So that's where Chazal get this idea. Good. The Gemara goes weiter. So the Gemara says, so we'll say interesting idea. The Risha says, the place where you stop laning on Shabbos morning, that's where you pick up in Mincha. B'mincha, Sham Korn B'Sheni. The place where you leave off in Mincha is where you pick up on Monday. B'Sheni, Sham Korn B'Chamish. The place where you leave off on Monday, that's where you pick up on Thursday. B'Chamish and Sham Korn L'Shabbos Haba. Div Rabbi Meir. So we'll say Rabbi Meir has this very interesting model of Kriyas HaTorah. He essentially says, every time you read, you're reading a little bit more of the parsha. So therefore, again, you end Shabbos morning, Parsha's B'Shaloch. So you'll begin Shabbos afternoon, Yisro. You'll read 9 psukim in Yisro. So you read the next 9 on Monday, the next 9 on Thursday. And so already, again, you come to Shabbos morning, Baruch Hashem, you're 27 psukim into Yisro already. That's Rabbi Meir's model. Rabbi Yehuda Omer no. Makom shemafsikim b'Shabbos shachar sham kor b'mincha or b'sheni b'chamish l'Shabbos haba. So I will say ultimately again, Rabbi Yehuda is how he paskin that no. Wherever you stop Shabbos morning, that's now that you're going to read the same kriya, Shabbos mincha, Monday and Thursday, and the following Shabbos. Beautiful. Says the Gemara. Amrav Zera halacha makom shemafsikim b'Shabbos Shachris Sham Korn b'Mincha b'Sheni b'Chamishu l'Shabbos haba. And Rabbi Silber says that's talacha. Wherever you stop leaning on Shabbos morning, that is in fact where you're going to pick up by Mincha, Monday, Thursday, and the following Shabbos. I believe halach Rabbi Yehuda. So why don't you just say the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda? Top of Lamed Beis Mishum da'apriluk. Because we're both say sometimes the names are changed around. So therefore Rabbi Zera was reticent just to say the halacha follows like Rabbi Yehuda, because in some versions the attribution is not to Rabbi Yehuda to others. Therefore, he just stated what the halacha is. Incredible. Rabbi say a great halacha. Tan Rabbanon poseach v'roeh golel umavarech v'chozer uposeach v'kaderemer. So we'll say here we go. We'll say one of the interesting things is what is the proper etiquette when you get an aliyah, right? Should the sefer be open? When you're making your bracha, should it be closed? What should you be doing? So we'll say we're going to see an interesting machlokes. Rabbi Meir holds like this. Now look at the lashon. Poseach v'roeh. So I'm going up now for an aliyah. I'm the ola. I'm getting the aliyah. I should open up the sefer, see where I'm going to read from, because we'll say the idea is the reason you're supposed to see where your aliyah starts is because when you make the bracha of Birchas HaTorah, that bracha is supposed to devolve upon your aliyah. So therefore, again, it's almost like you're making a bracha on a certain chefs, on a certain object of Torah. I'm making my bracha on my aliyah. So therefore, I should see where my aliyah is supposed to. By the way, you have this concept in general. Like the same way, if you want another cup of coffee, you don't make a shahakol niyabidvaro here and then run to the kitchen to get the cup of coffee. The idea is you should hold the cup of coffee in your hand while you're making, in general, whenever you make a bracha, the bracha should be on an identifiable object upon which you are making the bracha. You're getting an aliyah, you should see in the Torah where your aliyah starts. So, poseach, you open the scroll, roeh, see where you're going to get your aliyah, golel, close the scroll back up, mevarich, then make the bracha, Then choser uposeach v'korei. Then open it back up and read again. So Moshe, this is the position of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir therefore says essentially, you should make a bracha over a closed scroll. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no. Poseach v'roeh umevarech v'korei. Rabbi Yehuda says halacha l'maisa. Again, we'll say they're only arguing really on one point. You open the scroll, see where you're going to start your aliyah. But Rabbi Yehuda says you don't have to close the scroll back up. You don't have to scroll back. Leave the scroll open when you make your bracha, and then just go right into the kriya. So we'll say the point of contention between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is essentially everybody agrees on poseach. You have to open the scroll up because obviously remember when I get up for the aliyah, the scroll is closed, right? Why is the scroll closed? Because in between aliyahs, we're always closing the scroll, right? So everyone agrees the first step when I get up for my aliyah, open the scroll. Next step, roeh, see where I'm going to go ahead and get my aliyah. Here's the machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda then says, close it back up, make the bracha. Rabbi Yehuda says, leave it open and make the bracha. Says the Gemara, my time, Rabbi Meir. Why does Rabbi Meir say you have to close the sefer back up? Kidula, listen to this. This is great. Da amra ula, mipnei ma amru hakori bator lo yesilim torgaman. Rabbi, listen to this interesting halacha. If you're the Balkorei, you should not assist the Torgaman in his explanations. Halacha. Let's assist the Torgaman. Why not? Kadesh lo yomru targum kasav batorah. What are we concerned about? If the Balkorei helps out the Torgaman, Rabbosai, it might lead the people to the erroneous conclusion that what? That the Targum is written in the Torah. Right? So the Balkorei is reading from the skull. The Torgaman is doing his thing. If the Balkorei kind of chimes in a little bit, and potentially he's still even looking down at the scroll, people will come to erroneously think that Targum is written in the Torah. Hachanami, so Rabbi Meir says over here, Kadesh lo yomru brachos ksuvin batorah. Rabbi Meir says, if you're going in and getting an aliyah, and now you have the scroll open, and you're looking in and you're making brachos, what could happen? People may think the brachos themselves are written in the Torah, but it just leads to a skewed understanding of what Torah is. I say, what about Rabbi Yehuda? But say Rabbi Yehuda allows you to keep the scroll open when you're getting an aliyah. So when you're making a bracha, Rabbi Yehuda targum ikalamiti brachos lekalamiti. So we'll say Rabbi Yehuda says no. People might get confused with targum. In other words, I hear that they could think that targum is included in Torah. No one's going to think that brachos are included in Torah. Because we'll say everyone understands that brachos, again, are something independent that exists by all mitzvahs. So just Rabbi Yehuda holds, no one's concerned that if you make the bracha of Asher Bachar Banu, or Asher Nasal Lanu, right? If you make that bracha in front of an open scroll, no one's going to think that the bracha itself is contained in the scroll. So we'll say, how do we pass? Rabbi Zera, Amr Rav Masna, halacha, what's the halacha? Poseach v'ra umevarich v'korei. So Rabbi Zera says that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, namely, go up, open the scroll, see where you're going to lean from, keep the scroll open, make the brachos, and then begin the aliyah. So once again, Rabbi Zera, why don't you just say the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda? Once again, mishum da'apchilu, because Rabbi say again we have this issue that apparently in some versions of this discussion it wasn't Rabbi Yehuda, it was a different name. So therefore, Rabbi Zera, instead of getting caught up in the possibility of name confusion, just articulated what the halacha is. So Rabbi say, so how do we pass halacha l'maisa in this? So this is actually very important. So the Gemara says, so the Shulchan Aruch says this is simin kuf lamites sif dalid. Kuf lamites sif dalid. Here's the halacha. Rabbi say, kalakorin. Whenever you get an aliyah, so you go ahead and you make a bracha before and after your aliyah. So here we go. Here is the process for an aliyah. You have to open up the sefer. And what? You have to go ahead and see where the pasuk that your aliyah is going to start. And what happens? Then you should go ahead and make the bracha. So we'll say now the Mishnah Berurah says, V'achakach yivarich rotza lomar shein tzarich liglol sefer Torah b'shas berchaso. We'll say we do not close the scroll back up during the bracha. We don't close the scroll back up. So I open it up, see where I'm going to go ahead and be laning from, where my aliyah is going to start, but we don't close the scroll back up. He says, ultimately, again, Mishnah says, because we're not concerned that people are going to think that the brachas are in the Sefer Torah. V'davka bracha rishona lo chashashu lezeh, mishum tircha detzibura, sheyitztarchu lahamtin ad sheyachzur v'yiftach. So I will say this is very important. The Mishnah Berurah, so the Mishnah Berurah says, when do we keep the scroll open? This is only by the first bracha. And I will say the Mishnah Berurah here says something that the Gemara didn't mention. Why do we keep the scroll open? In other words, like if there's a machlokes at all about keeping the scroll open, the easiest thing to do is what? Leave it, right? Close it. Just close it back up. Who cares? Here's what's interesting. You know why we keep it open? There's a tircha de tzibura issue. What's the tircha de tzibura? That if you close the scroll back up and then you open it back up, what's the possibility? First of all, the time that it takes to open it back up, which is fine. But what are we really concerned about? The Balkori is not going to find the place. It happens, Rabbi said. It happens. That's the tircha de tzibura. Therefore, the Mishnah Berurah says when we speak about keeping the scroll open, that's only for the bracha v'asher b'charbanu. After your aliyah, you close the scroll up before you make the bracha. And the reason for that is because why? The scroll is going to be closed up regardless, because the scroll is always closed in between aliyos. Therefore, there's no tircha de tzibura. So therefore, we'll say therefore the Mishnah Berurah says keeping the scroll open is only for the first bracha, not for the second bracha. Second bracha, you close it back up and you make your bracha like that. Now, we'll say that the Mishnah Berurah does say something very interesting. He says that halacha lemaisa. He says that halacha. I'm sorry. Back to the Shulchan Aruch. So Shulchan Aruch says ula'achar shekar golem avarich ubishas bracha rishon. So we'll say so that's the mechaber, right? Mechaber paskins like Rabbi Huda, like Rabbi Zera said on the Mishnah that again I get my aliyah, I open up the sefer, see where I'm going to the attention. I will say what's not brought down in halacha? What's not brought down? Kissing the spot. Right, that's not brought down. And I will say, I would point out that many actually the poskim bring down nothing wrong with kissing the spot, but many of the poskim bring down that one should not touch their tzitzis to the letters, but rather again one should touch their tzitzis to the margins. And that's just a practical piece of advice, because the more you scrape against the letters, the more you run the possibility ultimately of somehow, what's the word? Cracking the ink. So I will say, but I just want to point out that concept, interestingly enough, of kissing the sefer is actually not brought down in halacha, not brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah adds in something very important. He says, "Ubishat shemavarich bracha rishona yafoch panav alatzad shuli yenekim mavarich minat Torah." So listen to this. I will say, the Ramah says, but what can you do when you make your bracha? Asher b'charbanu, turn to the side. Turn to the side. Turn your face to the side. Therefore, I will say, you're efshel lekayim shnehem. That way, everybody's happy. You have the sefer open, like Rabbi Huda, therefore there's no tircha de tzibura. But because you're turning your face to the side, therefore what? It's clear that you're not reciting the brachos from the scroll. The Mishnah Berurah says, you don't have to turn your face to the side. What else can you do? Close your eyes. Close your eyes. So a person could recite the bracha with their eyes closed, and it's the same idea. It's the same idea that I'm not reading. Now, so I want to be clear. The Mechaber, right, of Yosef Karo does not bring down this idea. The Ramah just adds it. He just adds this idea of turning your face to the side or closing your eyes. So I will say that is the halacha l'maisa. So go up, get the aliyah, open up the sefer, see where you're going to read from, make the bracha asher b'charbanu with an open scroll. According to the Mechaber, could look straight in. According to the Ramah, turn your face to the side. He also says you should be turning to the left. Turn to the left, because my left is the right of the Shechina, so I should turn my head to the left, says the Ramah. Or Mishnah Berurah, close your eyes, finish the aliyah, close the scroll back up, make the bracha on a closed scroll, because then there is no longer an idea of tircha de tzibura. Beautiful. Amr Zera, Amr Masna, haluchos va'bimos ein b'hem mishum kedusha. Luchos and bimos don't have any kedusha. So we'll say bima is a platform. Rashi says this is referring to the platform of the king by Hakel. Right, by Hakel, we'll say, which would be again the mass gathering in the Sukkis after the Shemitah year, where everybody is gathered together learning Torah. That bima does not have kedusha. And I will say luchos. This is very interesting. Rashi says that luchos actually refers to the wooden boards that they would sometimes put on top of books, like book covers, wooden book covers. So those luchos, those book covers, do not have kedusha. I'm going to Shvat Rabbi Yochanan Hagolo Sefer Torah. So when you are rolling a sefer, now really what this means is you're tightening a sefer. You should always tighten the sefer on the seams. In other words, you're supposed to remember again, the pieces of parchment themselves, right, are tied together. So a person when they're well, this actually, so this is not Galila like we think about it, like lifting like Hagba and Galila. This is, you're just tightening a scroll. You're just tightening the scroll. When you're tightening, tighten on the seam, which is just, again, I will say, this is not the hashkafic idea, it's just a practical idea. Because if chas v'shalom the sefer splits, we always want the sefer to split on the seam. The same way by Hagbah, we have the idea that we always want to do Hagbah on the seam, right? So chas v'shalom, again, should the sefer split, it splits on the seam. Hagolo sefer Torah, I will say this is an interesting case. If one rolls a sefer, now both sides, just the imagery over here is not the way we would think about it intuitively. Rashi says, what's the case? The case is you have one person rolling a sefer. How is he rolling the sefer? So I will say, if you can imagine, the sefer is on his lap. And I will say, if you could imagine, again, the sefer is put widthwise across his lap, right? So I have one column here. And that's how I'm rolling it against him. Again, I don't think we think about rolling it. You have it on the bima and you kind of just roll it yourself. Here, it's on my lap. So again, the length of the Torah is situated across the width of my lap. So the Gemara says, when you roll, goli mi bachutz, roll the outer column, ven golo mi bithnim. Don't roll the inner column. So I will say, this is just a piece of practical advice, so that ultimately, again, the outer column doesn't get away from you and chas v'shalom roll down. Ukishu mahadko, when you're tightening the sefer, mahadko mi bifnim ve mahadko mi bachutz. Tighten it from the inner column and not from the outer one. I will say, again, Rashi just points out just practical advice to make sure that the sefer doesn't rip or that the pieces of parchment don't bunch up. So what's the, get ready for this. So if 10 people go ahead and return out. Now again, why is it saying 10 people? Well, it's like, because 10 people, you need a minyan. You need a minyan for Kriyas HaTorah. So if you have a minyan, right, for Kriyas HaTorah, Hagodol Shebahen Golel Sefer Torah. Right, Jabosai, you give now Gola, the one who rolls it, ultimately again, you give him, the Gadol, the most important person, gets Galila. Now Jabosai, what they call Galila is a little bit different than what we call Galila. What they call Galila is what we call Hagbah. Right? So the greatest kavod that you could give a person is Hagbah. Is the lifting up of the sefer. Because I remember again, the person who lifts it, if you think about it, the guy who gets Galila, what's his job really? His job is really to assist the Magbia in gold. Because remember, again, I will say, when you do Hagbah, in order to do Galila, the guy who's holding the sefer has to go ahead and roll it on the bottom also. The job of the gold, what we call the guy for Galila, is he's assisting the Magbia. So therefore, again, the guy who does Hagbah is really called the Golel. He's really called the guy who does Galila. So I will say, it's amazing. Then in the eyes of Chazal, the guy who does Hagbah, he's the most important, right? You give that to the Golel. Hagololo no tel schar kulan. The person who does Hagbah Galila, we're going to call it one thing, ultimately, again, gets the schar of everyone else. Ultimately, again, the one who does Hagbah Galila, he gets the schar of everyone. Schar kulan. I will say now, it sounds like what happens over here is he takes the schar of everyone. To which the Gemara says, no. Elaima kibel schar kineged kulan. No. What it means is he receives schar corresponding to everyone else's schar. I will say a very beautiful idea. It's interesting, this idea of why is there so much importance given to the person who does Hagbah? Because it will say, what does the person who does Hagbah? What's the message he gives to everyone else? What's the message? You can lift this. See, Rabbi says sometimes we look at Torah, and we look at Torah as just an overwhelming load that I can't shoulder. Right? And even if I could shoulder some of it, I can't shoulder all of it. Even if I could do some of it, I certainly can't do all of it. And I will say, every single time I see Hagbah, what do I see? I can lift this. It's heavy, but I can lift this. So the person ultimately, again, who inspires the Kehillah to understand that they could shoulder this load, that they could lift this Torah, that they can carry this Torah, the person who shows that, demonstrates that to the Kehillah, he's the Gadol Shebakulad, and he gets the Schar Kineged Kulad. But Rabbi saying, what's very important is this way you begin to see, why do you give Hagbah to the most important person, to the Gadol Shebakulad? Why? Because Rabbi say, in order to properly give this message, physical strength is not enough. The best thing is if the person who's doing Hagbah models this in his own life as well. See, if the guy who goes ahead and does Hagbah is a guy who everyone knows does absolutely nothing, so the message is not received. But if the Gadol Shebakulan, if the most important person is the one who's doing Hagbah, and people see that, they say, just like Ploni is lifting that Torah, it's possible. You could lift the Torah. You could shoulder the Torah. You could go ahead and take on all the responsibilities and be successful. And Ploni's doing it. That guy's doing it. And if he could do it, so could I. So could I. It was an incredible yisod. So the Gemara goes weiter. So the Gemara says, this is a wild Gemara. How do you know that you're allowed to listen to a baskol? Now we'll say, now what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, in belibo lahaskel davar. But listen to this. Let's say you're not sure. You have a particular life opportunity. You're not sure, should you do it or not? V'shama kol, and we'll say you're unsure. And then v'shama kol, you hear a voice. Ohin olav, and you hear a voice that says yes, or a voice that says no. Holech acharav. You could follow the voice. Ve'ein kan mishum nichush. And Abba said there's no problem of nichush, no problem of divination. Now again, I want to strongly urge not to rely on this Gemara, right? But halacha l'mais, what the Gemara is saying is that sometimes, because again, we live in a different time, but the Gemara is saying over something amazing. The Gemara is saying sometimes in life, what I will tell you the Gemara is saying is like this, sometimes in life, I'm not sure what to do. And the Gemara is saying over here that the Ribono Shel Olam sends us messages in all kinds of ways. You know, we often think if only God would speak to us. God does speak to us. Right? Not in a direct communication, not do this, not do that, but he absolutely speaks to us. And sometimes you just have to have an open heart and an open neshama and an open mind to hear the messages. So that's the Gemara saying over here. Amish, how do you know that if you're unsure to do something and you hear a sign, Ohin, Olav, that you could listen? So the Gemara says, Shneimar va'azonecha tishamana davra me'acharecha lemor. V'hani mili, tishama kol gavra b'masa v'kol isa b'dabra. That's only if you hear a male voice in the city or a female voice in the desert. The idea being, you hear a voice that you wouldn't normally hear. So, right, if you hear a voice that you wouldn't normally hear, that could be a sign that it's a baskal. So, we'll say, whether or not, v'huda amar hin, v'huda amar lav. And it has to say yes twice, or no twice. So both said the idea that the Gemara is saying over here is Chash Baruch Hu does communicate with us. Now again, whether or not today there's such a thing like this as a baskol, I don't know. But one thing is clear from Chazal, which is that sometimes in life when I'm unsure what to do, look for the signs. Look for the signs. Because the Ribono Shel Olam absolutely communicates with us day in and day out. Just so often, you know what's happening? If the Ribono Shel Olam is broadcasting on AM and I'm on FM, I'm just not getting any of the signals. I'm just not getting the programming. I have to be tuned into the right frequency. And I'm able to see the signs. I'm able to hear the message of both sides. That's why we learn. Because when we learn, and when we engage in Torah, and when we do chasadim, and when we give tzedakah, and when we do mitzvos, that puts us in the right frequency. So suddenly I'm able to hear the transmissions. I'm able to hear the messages that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is broadcasting to me each and every day. So I don't know if it comes in the form of this baskol, hin, lav, a male voice in the city, a female voice in the desert. I don't know how it comes, but it absolutely comes day in and day out. But you have to be plugged in order to be able to hear them. Both say, let's finish. Says the Gemara, both say, very profound Gemara. If you go ahead and you read Chumash without the trop, right? Or you learn without a tune, without a niggin, right? You learn without, below zimra, without song. In other words, what's that? What the Gemara says about such a person, the pasuk says, apparently, I've given them laws that are not good. In other words, we'll say, what does this mean? So, Abaye, so we'll listen to this before we go on. So we'll say, such a profound Gemara. If you learn without singing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, apparently, you don't like my Torah. In other words, they're both saying, it's not just enough to learn. I have to learn besimcha. I have to learn with joy. You could learn Torah without simcha, but learning Torah without simcha is like learning any other, piece of information. You could ingest it, you could internalize it, you could retain it, but it doesn't become part of your neshama. For Torah to become part of your neshama, you have to sing it. You have to sing it. You have to go ahead and learn with a niggin. You have to learn with a little bit of an oomph. You have to learn with simcha. And if I learn with simcha, then ultimately, again, that Torah becomes mine. So the Gemara says, so Abaye was a little bit surprised by this interpretation, and therefore he advances a different one. No, the pasuk refers to the following. If two Talmidei Chacham live in one city, ve'enoch and zeh b'halacha, halacha, and they don't go ahead and consult each other in matters of halacha, Aleim HaKasav Omer, V'gamani nasatem chukim lo tov u'mishpatim lo yichyu bahem. So we'll say, ultimately, again, the Gemara says that no, it's a reference to Talmidei Chachamim who live in the same city. If you live in the city with other Talmidei Chachamim, it is your obligation to consult with them, to learn with them, to go ahead and engage in matters of communal policy with them. And if you don't, and rather, again, you only learn Torah and explore Torah, Paskan Halacha by yourself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us you're doing a disservice to my Torah. So profound. Am Rabbi Yochanan. Am Rabbi Parnach. Am Rabbi Yochanan. Both say wide line. Sefer Torah Aram Nikbar Aram. Very profound Gemara. If you touch a Sefer Torah, both say, which means if you touch the cloth directly, you touch the parchment directly, which means you're touching the Torah naked, so to speak, without a covering. Ultimately, a person is buried naked, meaning without tachrich and without anything. So the Gemara says, Aram Salata, does that really? Sounds like pretty severe. To which the Gemara says, Ela nikbar Aram below mitzvos. Rather, it means you're buried unclothed without mitzvos. If you touch a Sefer Torah without its covering, you touch the parchment directly, a person is buried, right, without clothing as well. Could that be? In other words, the Gemara says, not without clothing, but without mitzvos. Without mitzvahs, because I touched the Sefer Torah, I have no mitzvahs. So the Gemara says, Ela Amar Abaye nikbar arum below osa mitzvah. Rather, it means you're buried naked of or bereft of that one mitzvah. I will say, in other words, if I'm learning Torah, but my hands are on the parchment, ultimately, again, I don't get the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Right? Nikbar arum means I'm buried. I leave this world without that one mitzvah of learning. We'll say, why? So we'll say, the whole yesod is, it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. A person has to just like I have to learn Torah singing, and I have to learn Torah besimcha. I also have to learn Torah with a sense of reverence for Torah. And a person who just puts their hands on the parchment is lacking that reverence. So you could be learning the right information and in turn ingesting the right information. But if I'm not doing it in the right way, I'm disrespecting the scroll, then by definition I don't have that mitzvah. I will say the incredible yesod being in life, it's not just what you do that's important, but it's how you do it that is of equal importance. Let's finish. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yanai, Brei Rabbi Yanai, Saba Mishvei Rabbi Yanai, Mit Mutov Tigalo Hamitpachas V'Ayagal Sefer Torah. We'll say very important halacha. It's very important. We'll say, now they used to wrap the Sefer Torah in a covering. So there are two ways you can wrap a Sefer Torah, which is how? You could take the Torah and roll the Torah into the covering, or you could roll the covering around the Torah. The Gemara says, very important to roll the covering around the Torah and not to roll the Torah around the covering. It's just the sound of the circle. We'll say, the Mishabura Paskins this way also. Gabi, you know what else? Tefillin. When you're winding your Ritzuas, there are two ways you could wind your Ritzuas. You could hold the Ritzua and move the bias, right? Or you could take the Ritzua. The Mishnah Berurah says you can't move the bias. That's considered to be disrespectful to the Torah. So you hold the bias in place, wind the Ritzua around the bias, don't move the bias around. Same idea by Sefer Torah. Good. Abosai, we come to the last section of Maseches Megillah. We have a whole minute. Good. Vayidaber Moshe es Moadei Hashem. El Bnei Yisrael, mitzvahs shikorin osan kol echad ve'echad mizrah. So also remember again, the Mishnah ended by saying, "Vayidaber Moshe es Moadei Hashem el Bnei Yisrael." Moshe Rabbeinu spoke about the appointed times, right? The Yom Tov with Klal Yisrael. We learned that from there that there is a mitzvah to learn about each Yom Tiv in preparation for the Yom Tov. We'll say, "Tan Rabbanon Moshe tikein lohem." Moshe Tiglan Yisrael Shu Sholin V'Darshan Minyono Shel Yom Hilchos Pesach BaPesach Hilchos Atzeres BaAtzeres Hilchos Chag BeChag. Moshe Rabbeinu was matakin, says the Gemara, that halacha l'maisa we should learn all of the halachos of a Yom Tiv. Now here it says on Yom Tiv itself. So you should learn Hilchos Pesach on Pesach, Hilchos Shavuos on Shavuos, Hilchos Sukkos on Sukkos. So we'll say, but we know also that ultimately what this takana was to go ahead and learn the halachos 30 days. 30 days. Learn the halachas of Pesach 30 days before Pesach, Shavuos 30 days before Shavuos, Sukkot 30 days before Shavuos. So we'll say, why does the Masechta end with this halacha? So of course the simple answer is because it was the last statement of the last Mishnah. But on a deeper level, we'll say, what's the message? What does it mean, Sholin V'Darshan Be'inyano Shel Chag? That we learn the halachas of a Yom Tov before a Yom Tov. We'll say, it teaches us that preparation is an absolute necessity for spiritual accomplishment. That I can't roll into ruchnius. It doesn't work. If I want to have cultivate a meaningful spiritual identity, that requires preparation. I want a meaningful davening, that requires preparation. I want meaningful learning, preparation. Meaningful chesed, preparation. Meaningful shalom bayis, preparation. Whatever you want to be successful in life, one requires a certain level of preparation for that avod. And I will say that is the parting message that Meseches Megillah has for us. Same way you make a bracha, we saw in the sugi, you make a bracha in order to prepare for the mitzvah. Any spiritual endeavor in which I want to experience success requires a healthy degree of hachana, a healthy degree of preparation. I will say, Mazel Tov, Shkoyach on concluding this Masechta, another beautiful, beautiful Masechta under our belt. And I will say, tomorrow morning in Yahrzeit Hashem, we begin the incredible, magnificent, and overwhelming journey of Maseches Moed Katan. Mazel Tov.